If you're watching us in the YouTube world, welcome. This is what we do every weeknight on our Zoom meetings. Every weeknight, Monday through Friday, we meet at 6:30 to do some prayer and some catechesis. And normally how that goes is I'll give a little 4 or 5 minute teaching, a little catechesis on an aspect of the faith. Then we'll have a time to, if you want to ask questions, people can do that. And then we'll pray it together. We pray a Divine Mercy Chaplet. It's a great way to stay connected. I've found it personally very enjoyable and very fruitful and valuable to see so many of you. But we'll just go ahead and do that tonight. What we're doing for catechesis so far is going over the names of the Eucharist. So in this, I didn't bring my catechism with me, but in that big green book, the Catholic Catechism, it has an article in there that says, what is the Eucharist called? What are its names? And it lists a bunch of different names. And so what we do basically is we just go one by one with those names and we unpack it a little bit. So tonight's name of the Eucharist is the Memorial of the Lord's Passion and Resurrection. And the Catechism, that's all it says. It's kind of funny. I wish I had it here to show you. This is the whole quote, the Memorial of the Lord's Passion and Resurrection. So thankfully they talk about it in other places, in other texts, so we can unpack that a little bit. But basically we call the Eucharist the Memorial based on Jesus's command to do this in memory of me at the Last Supper. So this sacrament memorializes Jesus's life, death, and resurrection. St. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, when he's telling the story of the Last Supper, he wrote, "As often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes." So we're memorializing this moment. So in the scriptures, the term memorial always intends to give this sense of power and proclamation. So it's a remembrance of God's action in the world, but in scriptural terms, it's more than a simple remembering. It's by remembering, it makes present that action, or the power of that action through God's Spirit. And so this was the Jewish understanding, for example, of like Passover. So every year when they would remember Passover, they would memorialize that by eating the Passover meal, and they would remember God bringing them out of slavery to the Egyptians and bringing them into freedom. And they believed that because God is who he is, that act of remembering would make that power present yet again. So now, fast forward into the new covenant, how much more when it's the God-man, when it's Jesus himself instituting the memorial and doing the memorial, does it bring the divine power into the present moment? So I kind of like to think of the memorial like this. Lots of us have pictures of loved ones in our homes, loved ones who have passed on before us. We have those pictures because it reminds us of their life and their love. And it's nice to bring those memories of them into the present moment. Or I also have like this card here. It's a basketball card of Pete Maravich, Pistol Pete. So he passed away many years ago, but this card is sort of like a memorial of his life and his basketball career. So when Jesus institutes the memorial of his suffering and death, he's sort of thinking along those same lines, except then the Eucharist is not a mere picture or an image or a card, but it's his actual life, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Because of who God is and because of how powerful he is, his memorial actually makes present the power of that life. So when we do Eucharistic adoration, we use this language, the prayer of benediction. The priest will pray, "O God, who in this wonderful sacrament left us a memorial of your passion, grant, we pray, that we may so venerate your sacred mysteries of your body and blood, as always to be conscious of the fruit of your redemption." So we say that, and at each and every Mass, in fact, during the Eucharistic prayer, immediately after the words of institution, we pray a prayer of Anamnesis, which is simply a Greek word for memorial, which memorializes the moment that just occurred. So every time we celebrate Eucharist, it's a memorial of Christ's passion, death, and resurrection, and it brings that power into the present moment, into our lives. So that's the Eucharist as memorial. If you're on YouTube, we're going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to unmute us, all the Zoom participants, as we continue to move on. So if you have any thoughts about any of that or questions, I would love to hear them.